I believe Eric is on the line. Eric Johnston is on the line, DHCD Director. And Eric, I think we have a quorum, at least, of our advisory group members on the line. So if you're okay, sort of kicking us off here, it would be
Yes,
fantastic.
thank you, Dan. That sounds great. Thanks for starting off. Welcome to all the Stakeholder Advisory Group members, and also to all the members of the public and our agency partners that are working together on the Housing Innovations and Energy Efficiency Program and the process of getting stakeholder feedback and input as DHCD works to deploy the resources in partnership with our fellow state agencies to improve energy efficiency to benefit low-income Virginians. We really appreciate. We know today's the start of the General Assembly. We know many of you all are very busy with that process, and also very busy with all the different roles you're in. So we really appreciate you taking the time to bring your expertise, experience, and passion to the work ahead of us. And I will do a couple introductions, and then I want to just really make it sure to turn it over to back to Dan to get us into the meat of the agenda and make sure we use the time to that you see before you in the agenda. So a couple of folks to introduce. Again, I'm Eric Johnson, the agency director at the Department of Housing and Community Development. We also have Pam Kestner, who's our chief deputy at DHCD and also the acting director of our division on. You heard Dan, who is we're really happy to have join us over the past couple months as our new associate director for our energy efficiency office and working on deploying this effort. Willie Fobbs is also on, and many of you know him from his work as associate director of our both our affordable and special needs housing program, our weatherization program, and other construction and rehab programs. So his team is the lead on those items, and he'll be actually presenting later today. Kristen Dahlman is DHCD's policy and legislative director, and then also Cody Anderson is on the policy team. So thanks to all the team for the work putting this together. I especially also want to thank our agency partners. I know I saw a couple jump on, at least Mike Dow from DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality, the Department's Mines, Minerals, and Energy. DMME is also a key partner in this effort, as well as Virginia Housing. Many of you all probably knew them as Virginia Housing Development Authority, our state's housing finance agency. So thank you all so much for taking the time today. And I hope that you all know and feel that this is a top priority for our agency. And we are very excited to utilize your input to make sure we are good stewards of these resources to really get the outcomes in terms of deploying these resources of the intention here. So I'll turn it back to Dan, and thanks again, Dan.
Great. Thank you very much, Eric. Appreciate it. And so let me just, Cody, if you could scroll ahead to the outline of the agenda. I think everyone hopefully has a copy of the agenda. It's available on the HIEE webpage. And I think we can, if anybody doesn't have it, maybe Kristen or Cody, you could drop that link into the chat so folks could get access to the actual agenda if they don't have it. But I wanted to just start today with a couple of background, just to sort of recap where we are. This advisory group met for the first time on December 15th last month. And one of the things that was emphasized was an opportunity for all of the members of the advisory group to sort of introduce themselves and give a little bit of a background statement in terms of their interest and support of this effort. So that is something that we wanted to clearly carve out some time for on today's agenda, and we'll do that right at the outset. Other housekeeping items is just, to emphasize that we want to make sure and convey to the advisory group that, we want everybody to feel free, all the advisory group members to feel free to jump in and mix it up and express your opinions in terms of how we do this. So just want to make sure that everybody feels welcome and heard. So for the presentation and public comment portions, I do have one Chase Counts with CHP who reached out who would like to provide public comments. When we get to that portion of the agenda, if you'd like to raise your hand and let us know if you want to provide public comments, that would be fantastic. And then we can recognize you and you can jump on. We are going to try to hold you to 2 minutes on the public comment period so that we can reserve some balance of the time for additional advisory group discussion. So I think we've got more time on the agenda for advisory group discussion than it actually appears to be. I don't think that Willie and I, or either of us will take 20 minutes to sort of present the information that we have for you. So I think we'll reserve any balance of time for additional advisory group discussions and questions and et cetera. So with that being said, I think what I'd like to try to do is pick up where we left off, and others can help me if I don't remember this correctly, but I think we started sort of in alphabetical order last time. And I think we, in terms of our advisory group, and I think we heard from Liz Beardsley. I think we heard from Nate, Ben Ferrato, Carmen Bingham, Casey Bliley, and I think we made it down as far as Jonica Casper. So folks, if you could correct me if I'm wrong there, but I think
we are not enemies.
you all had a chance to sort of introduce yourself and get a little bit of a background. So correct me if I'm wrong. And if not, if that is the case, I think that Eric Claville with the Norfolk State University Center for African American Public Policy would be next up. So let me know for those folks, I think that had a chance to introduce themselves already. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's where we were in sort of running down the list of advisory group members. So am I recalling correctly? Is that where we want to start?
Dan, I think it would be helpful because I don't know who on the public was also on the meeting in December. But if you could just run down the first, I guess it was 5 of us, yes, our names in the organizations we're with so that they know. And I don't feel I need to speak again, but
sure.
I don't know about the other 4. I'm not going to speak for them, but at least let the public know who we are.
Yes. Okay. Liz Beardsley with the U.S. Green Building Council is Senior Policy Counsel with USGBC. Nate Ben Ferrato is with the Southern Environmental Law Center. He's a Senior Attorney with SELC. Carmen Bingham with the Virginia Poverty Law Center is the Affordable Energy Project Manager. Casey Bliley is Executive Director of Viridiant. And Jonica Casper is the Executive Director of Community Housing Partners. So with that being said, do we have Eric on the line? Eric Claville. It does not look like we have Eric. So let me, Michelle Foster with Home Innovation Research Lab.
Michelle Foster, yes, with Home Innovation Research Labs. I'm VP of Sustainability and oversee the NGBS Green certification program for residential buildings.
Fantastic. Thank you, Michelle. Chelsea Harnish, are you with us today?
Hi, Dan. Yep, I'm here. I'm Chelsea Harnish. I'm the Executive Director of the Virginia Energy Efficiency Council.
Great. And like I said, you know, please take some time if you feel comfortable doing so, sort of, you know, expressing your interest in supporting this effort and, you know, and/or expertise that you bring to the discussion. So Michelle or Chelsea, if there's anything else that you'd like to add, feel free to jump in.
So additionally, so this is Chelsea speaking. My background obviously is in energy efficiency policies and programs. Our nonprofit works strictly in Virginia, working to advance energy efficiency policies and programs throughout the Commonwealth. So obviously we have a lot of interest in how this money is allocated as it's directed towards low-income energy efficiency programs.
And this is Michelle. The only thing I would add is that in my current position, we look to see how we can remove barriers to innovation for higher performing housing. So I'm particularly interested in that. But in the past, having worked at Fannie Mae and some of the financing challenges to energy efficiency improvements, I'm also interested in how we can really move that issue forward so that we can come up with some innovative ways to finance energy improvements in housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Sunshine, Mathon.
This is Sunshine. I'm the executive director at Piedmont Housing Alliance. I've been working in the affordable housing sector for over 15 years here locally in Charlottesville, which is where the organization that I work for is based, Piedmont Housing Alliance. And also in the past, I've worked for a long time in Austin, Texas, prior to being here. I'm also an architect by training, so I bring a little bit of technical expertise to the table as well. My work has always been looking at the intersection between sustainability, energy efficiency in particular, but sustainability overall, and affordable housing, with a specific goal to align the work of energy efficiency and serving low-income communities. Our organization here in Charlottesville primarily works in the multifamily sector as a developer, owner, and property manager, but we are on the verge of also kind of getting back to our roots and doing more work in the home ownership support side as well. I've been, as an organization, have been the recipient of WAP funding for properties that we own. And in one project in the past, I've also participated in a carbon offset fund to facilitate some of the deep energy efficiency work there.
Great. Thank you, Sunshine. That's really helpful. Duane Robinson with NRDC.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And good morning, everyone. Duane Robinson with the Natural Resources Defense Council. I'm based in DC, but my role with NRDC is primarily on our energy efficiency for all projects. So I work in coalitions and work in policy advocacy in 4 states, New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia, as a regional director of energy affordability. And so that primarily focuses on energy efficiency and low income, energy efficiency and equity. So my focus here is pretty much based on our interest in ensuring that everyone, hence the name Energy Efficiency for All, can benefit from these energy efficiency resources. And it's guided by a report that IFA, along with ACEEE, put together back and released in 2016 on energy burdens, which looked at how people are struggling paying their energy bills, and particularly those who are at the worst end. The top 25% of those who can't afford it are experiencing 15, 20, 25% of energy burden. They're spending that much of their income on energy. And so I want to ensure that we are reducing those deferrals so that everyone can participate in energy efficiency. So it's not just energy efficiency for those who can afford it, energy efficiency for those who are eligible for it, but truly energy efficiency for everyone. So what can we do to ensure that everyone receives those benefits? So that's my interest here. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Duane. Appreciate that. Brian Staub with Marlin Development Corporation. Brian, are you on the line?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Brian Staub, I'm the CFO of Marlin Development Corporation. We're a private developer based in Virginia Beach. We're also a general contractor. We've built over 10,000 apartment units in the state, and probably about half of those have used the low-income housing tax credit. So we've had extensive experience with Viridian and the Earthcraft program. And additionally, a couple of our recent developments that are affordable, we've incorporated solar energy into those communities. So personally, I've been involved with LIHTC since about 1996. So I've seen a lot of transformation in the program from the early days to where it is now. And obviously, along with that, a lot of the new energy policy that's been incorporated into that program.
Excellent, Brian. Thank you. And great to have you on board. We really appreciate it. And Adam Stockmaster with TMA Development. Adam, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Well, I am honored to be a part of this group. Brief background on myself. I'm Adam Stockmaster, the president of TM Associates Development. The TM Associates group of companies is actually where owners, managers, and developers of affordable housing, that's all we do. We have over 200 communities and 15,000 units in 9 states, but I'm proud to say our biggest footprint's in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So like many of my colleagues here, I've been working in affordable housing in the Commonwealth for over 2 decades. We've got over 60 apartment communities scattered all throughout the Commonwealth. And we started in rural housing. And while we do have large urban projects in the District of Columbia and outside of Dulles Airport, our roots are in rural housing. And in that space, we've received more tax credit awards than any other developer by count, but not by number of units. And we are slowly working to preserve and create affordable housing throughout the Commonwealth. Of particular interest to myself as part of the stakeholders group is utilizing new technology. So as some of my colleagues have seen a lot of changes in technology in this space, I will be the first to say that in the last 20 years in developing communities, we've tried a lot of these, and some of them work great, some of them don't work as good, and we're taking steps now looking into modular and panelized construction in an effort to work on some other efficiencies. So I hope to add some talent to the pool of other interested parties here to really create a program that works for all Virginians. And I can't hit that enough that myself and my organization have worked with the weatherization assistance program and a few of the other programs, and wish we could apply it to every property and every household we serve, but there's a little bit of red tape in the way. So my hope is to flush some of that out and bring some efficiencies, and from my experience really provide to the group what I have found saves money for the residents. And in that space, I hope that we really create a effective program that we can measure results on. I think measuring results is critical.
Great. Thank you, Adam. Appreciate that. And we look forward to your input on to this group. Just again, going in alphabetical order here, Narissa Turner with Virginia Conservation Network. Welcome.
Hi, yes, I'm Narissa Turner, the Climate and Clean Energy Policy and Campaigns Manager for the Virginia Conservation Network. For full transparency, I also sit on the Local Energy Alliance program, LEAP, and hopefully I can both provide some insight and making sure a lot of the groups that VCN partners with had a vested interest in coming to see this program and the policy behind it come to fruition, and making sure that it works the way that those partners intended, and that it's serving Virginians in the way that our partners intended, and to also see hopefully that it's of some and so that's my VCN hat, my LEAP hat. It's also to hope to see some of this funds in these programs help LEAP provide more services in the energy efficiency and renewable energy services space. So thank you.
Thank you, Narissa. Appreciate that. And Karen Wilds with Newport News Housing Redevelopment Authority. Karen, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Good morning.
Good morning.
I guess just for a little bit of background, I have been working in the affordable housing arena for over 30 years. And currently here at the Newport News Authority, we've been doing a lot of rental assistance demonstration conversions of our public housing. and looking at various ways to reposition our public housing, which entails major renovation. So we have been active in the low-income housing tax credit arena for over 20 years, and that program is very essential in our repositioning of our public housing. And as you know, energy efficiency is very key in that program. So, you know, my goals for my participation is to, you know, help us with reducing energy costs for our residents, and also helping us reduce our energy costs so we have, you know, a better, you know, operating expenses and can provide services to our families in other ways other than just paying for their utilities. So we, I guess, very recently have gotten in our most recent project, or that we're going to be undertaking very soon in the next couple months, is stepping into the container housing arena. And we're real excited about that. We're probably going to be breaking ground on 2 houses that we were able to get from Virginia Housing. You may have seen them at the Governor's Housing Conference. We'll be putting those on foundations here in Newport News, and we're real eager to get some experience in that arena, because we certainly have a lot of containers here, right? Almost within, out my window, I can see them at the Port Authority. So I look forward to working with all of you.
Great. Well, thank you all for your very succinct and articulate introductions. And I think I probably don't need to emphasize, but we've got a lot of expertise and a lot of diversity of perspectives here within the advisory group. And I think we have the right group of folks around the table. And I'm excited to we're excited to jump in today to sort of begin in earnest and put pen to paper on this program. So we're actually running ahead of schedule because everybody was so succinct in their comments. So what is the will of the body here? Would you all, is there anything else that advisory group members would like to say at this point, or would you like to move forward and I can run through the presentation that we have for you?
I'd say let's be efficient with our time.
Okay, there's a motion from Karen. I see a second from Carmen and Narissa, or a second and a third. So let's go ahead and let's see. Right, and again, this is a slide that we presented to you in December, but again, for the benefit of those folks, I think Dewan was not able to join us in December, but just to, you know, to recap a few things here. This is what we're sort of projecting in terms of the program development timeline. So as you can see, we are, and per the will of the body of the advisory group during the December meeting, we're going to meet twice in January. So thank you all for that. And we realize this is a significant commitment of your time. And we do greatly appreciate that, and extend that also to your organizations and to your networks for everything that you're bringing to the table. I think we're going to, you know, I would say by February, what we're proposing to do is with your input, develop a draft allocation of percentages for the different funding buckets. And we're going to provide a straw proposal for you on those funding buckets today. And then perhaps on the 26th, we can get into further conversation about what you all think would be a reasonable, equitable allocation of those funds. Again, as we emphasized, we don't know exactly how much revenue will be derived from the regi revenue, because that auction clearing price does vary in each of the quarterly auctions. But I think the intent is to try to arrive at what we think is sort of an equitable percentage allocation, and then we sort of see, you know, roughly where that leaves us in terms of revenue and application of that revenue to these different buckets. In mid-March, we will know the outcome of the first regi auction. I believe it's March 2nd that Virginia compliance entities will be required to participate in. So at that point in time, we should have a clearer picture in terms of how the regi market is reacting to Virginia's entrance into regi. And I think we can then hopefully have at least general agreement or some consensus around these funding buckets and percent allocations. And we, DHCD, can do our work of bringing the governor's office and the Secretary of Commerce and Trade's office into the conversation in terms of what the advisor group and DHCD are putting forward in terms of recommendations. And then I think mid-April, having program-specific draft guidelines and sort of getting into the nuts and bolts of how we will integrate HIEE funding or the regi funding into either existing or new programs. So I will stop there and see Eric or Kristen if you have anything that you'd like to add.
I don't, Dan. I think you covered it really well, and we're as you all can see, we want to be aggressive with trying to get some of the allocation decisions, and then work to the actual guidelines for programs. I think one key thing to keep in mind too is that we envision long term some of the best outcomes for programs is that you start somewhere, and that there's nothing that says these decisions have to be as we look at demand and we look at program evaluation and hearing from stakeholders, those types of changes can happen in the future as well. And so we'd envision a continual kind of at least annual process to update the allocations and then also the guidelines for programs.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate that. Cody, if you want to move ahead to the next slide. All right. So just to recap briefly what we presented to you back in December, this is still, this is projected, obviously, based on the analysis that Department of Environmental Quality has done. And that includes that, based on the March and June 2nd, March 3rd and June 2nd regi auctions, that DHCD would receive roughly $27 million that would be applicable in fiscal year 2021. I think there is still a question with regard to how quickly DHCD can have this money as an appropriation. But our understanding is from Secretary Strickler's office is that we believe that that appropriation can happen relatively quickly. And then as we mentioned to you, the estimate going forward from 2022 throughout the rest of the regi compliance period is somewhere somewhere around the mid 50 million in annual funds to DHCD across the 4 annual auctions. This estimate is based on a relatively conservative regi auction clearing price to start with, but ramping up by 2030 to 565. And then, as we mentioned, because the allowances go down over the 10-year compliance period, the revenue estimates remain roughly even. So, Cody, if you'd like to flip ahead for me, please. And again, Willie gave you a detailed presentation of the Affordable and Special Needs Housing Program in December, but to recap, again, this is a program that serves through a variety of housing, through a variety of funding sources, our sort of lowest income and most vulnerable populations in Virginia, and serves thousands of households. And in fact, the funding allocation is going up for affordable and special needs housing, but there remains an unmet need in terms of there's always a gap and more funding requested than needed. But this is sort of, again, I think to put into context existing programs that DHCD runs and has infrastructure and program partners in place. And many of you all are familiar with the Affordable and Special Needs Housing Program. So next slide. Weatherization Assistance Program, or WAP, as it's referred to here in Virginia. Again, long-standing program, existing infrastructure, network of providers that serve low-income households throughout the state, thousands of households, and again, leveraging DOE funding and LIHEAP funding And I think what we're going to put forward today is that, some of this regi funding would be of great benefit to the weatherization assistance program. And we'll talk about that in some more detail. So Cody, if you want to. So I'm just making the case, and I won't read all the bullets here on the slides, but I think that, as Eric referenced, we are well aware that we want to reduce the time to market to get these funds activated and serving low-income households as quickly as possible. And we want to do that through a known infrastructure and existing partnerships. We want to have the flexibility of the regi funds or the HIEE funds to give us additional flexibility paired with other sources that that provide us less flexibility. So I think we see a real benefit in that, and we hope that we that benefit is clear to you all as well. And I think that additionality, I think that's a concept that I believe Sunshine brought up on the first call in December. The idea of the fact that we have additional funding, a significant additional funding source for affordable housing, gives us an opportunity to to affect some outcomes that we wouldn't be able to affect otherwise, and that is to unlock some savings that would not be achievable, to increase energy efficiency for performance and health and safety for these households that we're serving. So again, this is I think putting forward a case for what we're going to present to you in the next slide, which is as a straw proposal, we want to offer that our existing programs, affordable and special needs housing and WAP, do provide that sort of platform to get these funds out and serving our low-income households as quickly as possible, and particularly given the situation that we are in with the COVID-19 pandemic. And the other proposed bucket is, and we're open to feedback on the branding here, but a housing innovation partnership grant program that would be competitive and offer these examples just as examples. But I will say that at least in terms of internal discussions at DHCD, we're very interested in the opportunity of scaling, serving the manufactured mobile home, those households that live in manufactured mobile homes. We're aware of some really good work that's being done out there. And I think one of the things, I think an important investment would be to find ways that we can scale those types of retrofits. So, and I think I will mention also that Kristen and I had a conversation with Virginia Housing yesterday about their Reach Innovation Partnership Grant Program. And we are aware that, that Virginia Housing has a program already with a small amount of funding. And we concluded that there is definitely an opportunity for more investment in innovation in housing to serve low-income households. And I think that several of the advisory group members have already mentioned that today. So some of the things, that folks are looking at, modular as a way to reduce cost. Karen mentioned the shipping container housing. So I think we are proposing this as an opportunity to provide additional resources and support for those types of deployment efforts. So I think with that, the next slide is just a placeholder for Willie. Willie's going to talk a little bit about later on in the presentation about some of the logistics of integrating the HIEE funds with WAP. But I think at this point in time, we would like to open it up and give you all a chance to provide some feedback and to respond to what we're presenting to you all.
Hey, Dan.
Yes, go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, great job of giving that overview. One thing I wanted to reemphasize of what you said is that for 2 points, I think. One is that the amount of funds when the group and the public talks about the allocation percentages, I think it's important to emphasize that $50 million estimate annually Dan said this, but it's, you know, it's a conservative estimate. So in essence, when we think about what a percentage would translate into, I think it's fair to say that that would translate into the likely, nothing certain, but likely the minimum amount that a program would receive through an allocation of those three, whatever the final, you know, buckets are. It would likely be a lot more than that. You know, that's just my understanding. So I just want to make sure as we set the context there that everyone's aware of that. And then on the three buckets, the only thing I'd add, if Cody, if you can go back to that slide real quick. So when we talk about these buckets, especially the first two, we really received some good feedback from you all on different ways that we can make these programs get to that additionality and additional outcomes and be able to pair with funds at the federal level potentially where we can't do things with given federal guidelines. So really want to make sure folks know it's not an intention to just add to the existing program, but to use those vehicles that people are used to in the local government, nonprofit, community network to really apply on platforms that have an existing structure and network and that can be added to. And that third bucket, I think that's one where there's a lot of potential to increase and think through some ideas. I know we heard from local governments, several on the last public comment about allocations to local governments. I did want to make sure people were aware that local governments are one of our key partners in applying for the affordable social needs housing efforts. So that focus on both multifamily and single family rehab and construction in the ASNH space, and then that local governments though might have some ideas. It sounds like outside of the box there, if it's getting at low income energy efficiency improvements that might fit in this third bucket, which would be a new program. So that's all I wanted to add, Dan. Thank you and great job.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it. I think that Chelsea has her hand up. So I think.
No, I lowered it because Eric answered my question. I wasn't sure if that third one was a new program or existing.
Yeah, Chelsea, that would be a new program. So again, open to any general or specific feedback that the advisory group has. And then we're also, if nobody has anything immediately, we've got a few questions that are coming in through the chat, but I do want to give advisory group members a first crack at this. So please feel free.
Yeah, Dan, if I can jump in. I don't know if there's a hand raising function, but oh, there it is. I see it now. Sorry. All right, thanks. So, having missed the last call because I had a conflict, unfortunately, apologize. But I do on this slide. Did we have a discussion on how we would be identifying and tracking, serving that first bullet, the historically economically disadvantaged communities that I think was first defined in legislation last year? But has there been a discussion yet on metrics of tracking and following success on that potential measure?
Willie, I'll give you the first opportunity to take a crack at that because I think you might be better positioned to respond on that.
So good morning, everyone. Willie Fobbs, DHCD, and I was going to talk a little bit specifically about the weatherization assistance program because I've had some folks reach out about they're kind of familiar with the program but wanted to know a little bit more, and I just thought I would offer to provide that information like I did the last meeting for the affordable special needs. Dewan, in response to your question, that's something we're kind of still looking at right now. We know that that's going to be a specific area that we need to make sure that we're able to deliver and document on. And so, no, I think to answer your question, in the first meeting, it was just kind of laid out on the table that that needs to be a component of whatever we put forward. And so one of the things we wanted to have as part of this discussion is some ideas on how that could happen. In general, we know the program, because of income targeting, generally has, we track that kind of data. One of the things we've talked about internally is perhaps doing some overlays or overlaps with things like opportunity zone identification and other local government identification tools, that so we can kind of build that. But that's a good piece of what we wanted to kind of get input on, and maybe ways and ideas of how we could how we would go about doing that.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Willie. Now, Chelsea, I do see your hand up again.
Yes, yes, this time it's real. Can we go back to the other slide?
Yeah, the previous one, yeah.
Yes, that one, perfect. So I got, on this Housing Innovation and Partnerships grant, I have two questions. So one, will this advisory group, will we have the opportunity to shape what this program will look like? And then, yeah, actually, I'll ask that one, and then I'll make my comment.
Yeah, Chelsea, I think the short answer on that is yes. I think we would definitely appreciate the advisory group's input in shaping, tailoring, targeting this to where we think the highest value opportunities are. And so I will, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, but
yes, absolutely. I mean, that's it's a good question, or several questions, in that at least in our mind, it made sense to first get at the buckets, and then back on the timeline, part of I think it's the April, after we get at the buckets and figuring out the amount of funding that the stakeholders think is the right amount for the demand and the need and the impact. Then with knowing the amounts, working then on the program design, so that in essence there'd be three under this straw proposal. There'd be tweaks to a new funding stream available through basically 2 delivery networks and 2 application processes, ASNH and weatherization assistance. And then this one would be potentially a new one where, and again, we want your feedback if that makes sense, because there are, there's pluses and minuses to how you do it. What we heard in the first meeting was, just desire for some of the rehab and construction piece through ASNH. We heard a lot of feedback on the weatherization needs and deferrals and ways to increase our ability to serve, but also help serve people we have never been able to serve because of impediments with the federal rules of things like roofs not being available, or various different things that prevented us from serving all Virginians. I think someone said that well earlier. But on the long answer to say that's kind of the flow, is trying to figure out the dollar amounts that make sense with this group, and then also getting the input on some of the program design elements as we move to implementing them. So that's kind of the envisioned 2 steps of that.
Great, thank you. And then for the manufactured mobile home retrofits, are you saying that currently is not allowed under WAP?
No, that it is in fact currently allowed under weatherization.
Okay, but this would just be additional funding for that?
It would be, well, and again, I think that's kind of the input. So the mobile homes and manufactured homes are eligible. There are different provisions that are allowed for those types of units because of the structure, the way the roofs or the insulation is structured. So those are things that there are currently some federal rules governing, but there are some restrictions. So in some situations it may be a supplement. In other situations it could be a totally different set of allowable measures.
I'll add to that part of what we were envisioning with this is that, and I think Willie described it well, in that we're still envisioning serving manufactured mobile home through our existing programs. But this bucket, the idea was, can we come up with are there some things that are outside of that bucket, innovative ideas, things outside the bucket, the box that could help inform ASNH, WAP, or other things that would get at the outcome, so that we had a third, potentially smaller bucket of funds that would help us get at some of the new ideas that may be out there and give a chance for innovation. So that's the vision of it. But so it is kind of a bit more wide open for that piece at the moment, but it's not envisioned to be the hugest, at least in our internal conversations, we know a lot more about the demand for the first two. This third one is one where we wanted to see and get your feedback on what kind of things outside of ASNH and weatherization are there that might be ripe for some seed grants to test it out, or some ability to scale things and figure out other programs that could potentially exist in the future. So it's maybe an incubation bucket is a good way to say it, not just innovation, but incubation for things that if we find something that works and gets at our deliverables that the General Assembly, the stakeholders viewed as key, and the public, then we can scale it up in the future.
And Dan, just real quick, and I don't want to put anybody on the spot. I'm curious if there was, because I recall prior to the last meeting, there were a couple of, I know there was at least one written proposal, but some proposals received related to the idea of some allocations to local governments for some local initiatives. And I don't know if there's anyone on the line who could speak to that, or would be in a position to kind of reiterate if what some of those ideas that were presented.
I think Susan Elliott and Alicia Zatkoff were the two folks that spoke on that at our last meeting, and I don't believe either of them are on.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just add that I think, including local governments as sort of key potential partners in this grant program is really a way to sort of address that issue and, invite the localities into this partnership opportunity. So that, again, we're cognizant that localities may have sort of specific needs, and they know their market, better than we do. So the idea is that having a local government partner could be sort of perhaps a key criteria for such a grant program. But again, these are examples, but there are certainly areas where, we've already heard that, from the advisory group and other stakeholders, that these are potential priority areas.
This is Sunshine Mathon at Piedmont Housing. I know we're not quite at the point of discussion around, how much goes into each of these buckets, but recognizing that identifying all potential innovations right now is unlikely, and that things are likely to emerge over time. I wonder if it makes sense when we get to the question of how much funding goes into which bucket, we consider the idea of a small percentage in this first cycle for that innovation pool to allow for creative solutions to emerge, over the coming months.
I would second that opinion. This is Jenica.
Other thoughts, other advisory group members want to weigh in here? Chelsea, I see your hand back up again. Is that?
Oh, that was from last time. But yeah, I agree with that. I think if there's a opportunity to maybe be more fluid with the allocations year to year, I think that would be really helpful.
This is Casey Bliley. I was trying to recall some of Virginia Housing's innovation funding, and I know that I think there were only 1 or 2 allocations, if I recall correctly. Does anyone have any guidance there? I know one of them was really kind of looking at some creative economic financing as well. So like, for example, I know that they suggested the 4-9 combos as being one of the innovation strategies. I was curious if at all we should look to that and kind of what those asks have been to get an understanding of from a developer side. And Brian and Adam, please feel free to chime in as well. But what might be some innovative opportunities? And Karen too, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chelsea. You're correct. Last year, it was actually the fall of 2019, VHDA had a innovative tax credit round where they provided the competitive 9% tax credits to projects that provided an innovative approach that would also be scalable for future projects. So they were not looking to just provide a one-off. There were 2 or 3 projects, I believe, funded. We were one of those projects. It's a community that we hope to start construction on later this year in the city of Newport News. And our innovation approach to that community, amongst some little items here and there, including solar and solar hot water and solar for the common areas. But the true innovative approach that we took on that was the project is a 2-building project, and by that we're able to build one conventionally with standard stick frame as it's been done for over 100 years with standard insulation, etc. And then we're providing building one building with a insulated panelized product that's manufactured off-site and literally comes to the property and is screwed together. So we expect a lot of efficiencies in construction to be recognized, a lot of savings for the project and the timeline to be recognized, and having 2 buildings that we could provide this case study to. We hope to, have our partners at Virginia Tech who are working with us on this project really, document that. And then with one of those buildings being super efficient and the building envelope being practically 100% sealed, we expect real energy savings for the residents at that building, and it's going to be, tested and proven over the next 10 or 15 years with some additional testing by Virginia Tech. So that's one of the projects. I'm sure Virginia Housing can speak to the other 2 or 3 that were funded from the innovative pool, but I've also heard that one of them was no longer going forward. So that's everything I know in this space.
This is Brian Marlin. I don't think they had the innovation pool this year. And also, I don't believe that innovation has to be energy innovation.
Yeah, this is Eric Johnson. I'm not sure if we have anyone from Virginia Housing, but it's correct that there was the 9% innovation pool, and so thanks for that overview of that project. And then, in addition, separately, they have grant funds available through their REACH program that has been looking at innovation, manufactured housing, modular, and so, and to what Brian just said, there has not been a grant program on innovations in energy efficiency. So that would be and I think that a guiding light to remember is to go back to is that we want this, housing is so integrated, all the parts, we want it to be integrated with everything else on affordability, on technology. But the charge really from the General Assembly is really related to increasing energy efficiency for low-income Virginians. And so that's where we don't want to make that box is connected to all the other boxes of housing, but I think that's what would separate this out. And so they have, as I recall, they've done in the $500,000 grant range for some of those REACH grants that have been more some of the research and or demonstration projects, working with localities or innovative projects to increase affordability and try to start up new markets. So I hope that helps as well.
Great. Folks, this is Dan again, and just a time check. We're ahead of schedule. We continue to be ahead of schedule, and we're really pleased that there's a lot of robust discussion and some ideas being put forward here. We appreciate the feedback. There are a couple of questions from the members of the public, and so if you all don't mind, could we at least take at least respond to those, let those folks or respond to those questions, let them ask their questions. And I think, as I mentioned before, we only have one public commenter at this time, so that 20 minutes of time, we'll give back to the advisory group for discussion. Does that sound reasonable?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So Chris Meyer with LEAP has a question about LIHEAP. Can bill assistance money and household numbers that only receive bill assistance be split off so as to have more realistic comparison? Willie, I look to you again as our subject matter expert.
I'll try to respond to that. I'm not sure I 100% have the correct answer. However, so the bill assistance piece is not. So we reference the LIHEAP funding. In general, the Federal Department of Health and Human Services (HHS) allocates all of the LIHEAP funding. In Virginia, the direct LIHEAP recipient is the Virginia Department of Social Services. And the way the statute is written, DSS is able to use up to 15% of its LIHEAP allocation to supplement the weatherization assistance program. And so, and I'll talk a little bit about how the funding is broken down on my piece of this, but basically we get about 2/3 of the funding for the weatherization assistance program from LIHEAP through the LIHEAP grant and not specifically from the DOE funds. However, so with that said, all of the bill assistance portions of that remain at and administered through DSS. Now, one of the things that happens at about midway through each program year is our internal teams will share information to develop what we call a duplicated account and an unduplicated account. And so I probably know just enough to be dangerous in that regard, since my team kind of deals with how they compare who received assistance through DSS and who also funded through LIHEAP, and who may have also received weatherization services funded by the LIHEAP portion of weatherization. And so my staff kind of deals with that. I don't specifically, but with that said, I believe that there's a method to identify direct assistance clients versus those who were also served with weatherization. And so I'm hoping I'm answering your question, but that's what I can tell you, I guess, from a 30,000-foot level.
This is Kristen Dahman. I will say too that DSS, and then they get information from DHCD as well, produces an annual report on just how many households are served. They do break it down on just, they don't have a breakdown of like which families receive weatherization and heating or cooling assistance, but they do have that broken down. And we only have the federal fiscal year, like fiscal year 19 available, which we can send out, and it does have those numbers.
This is Jenica. I think ultimately the key there is once the home is weatherized, that assistance will decline over time in terms of dollars needed to support that resident. So I'm not sure that it matters there's a connection that they're getting both, other than hopefully both of those resources would be made available to them. But that's the whole theory. If you put more money into the actual renovations over time, utility bills will be reduced by the measures that you're installing.
Yeah, and to Jenica's point, I think that that is an important piece. This is Carmen, sorry, with VPLC. I think that's an important piece of data, maybe not directly for this group, but definitely overall on where we are going as a Commonwealth in terms of our policies and our programs that we're putting out there to serve low-income families. You know, who is it exactly we are, you know, what are the numbers looking like where we are actually moving people, especially for our organization, moving people up out of that poverty cycle. And that would be a really good tracker to help in determining this. And of course, DHCD is involved in the development of the new percentage of income payment plan that's going to be available here in a couple of years. That would be for these very same people that are going to be receiving these services. So I think, Adam, you're the one that was talking about the measurements are going to be critical. And so it's not just energy saved by the household, but cost savings for some of these programs and who we're actually serving, and to be able to target those folks a little bit better. I know Chase needs to make his. I'll wait until after Chase makes his comment.
Yeah. So Carrie, thank you, Carmen. And Carrie Hearn with DMME has a question. Has had her hand up for a while, so would like to get to her. If you can, Carrie, you on the line? Oh, it's not letting her unmute. Cody, do we have any? Can you work your magic and see if we can get Carrie?
Unfortunately, from Google's end, I can't unmute people. I'm only able to mute people. But Carrie, I can leave my phone number in the chat, and we can try and talk to the side, and I can try and figure out whatever is going on your end.
Yeah, my quick tip with sometimes with Google Meet is you sign off and sign back on, and it will get you back on. And you can also call in *6 if the computer won't work.
Okay, be right back, I guess, is that acronym. So while we're waiting for Carrie to log back in, other thoughts, comments from the advisory group? Want to make sure again that everyone feels welcome and heard as a part of these conversations. There are no bad suggestions. There are only good suggestions. So please feel free to jump in.
So I'll just jump in here. I've been waiting because I just wanted people to have time to chat. I think, first of all, Eric and Dan, I just want to thank you, Eric especially, because I think getting a better sense of where DHCD is looking to use these funds and focus these funds is very helpful. It is more aligned with what, quite frankly, I had thought that the vision was for the regi funds, and that would be to actually enhance the programs that are going on now, as well as provide that resource of money for those programs that we just don't have a funding source for yet. And so treating this more, that grants program more as an incubator is more aligned with the thought process that I had as to what they were intending for the money to be. And I think I'd like to echo what I think Chelsea said, and maybe a couple of the other advisory committee members said, about making sure that as we're looking at these funding buckets, I mean, I'm one of those people that I'm not really sure I feel comfortable setting a funding level when I don't know what the program needs look like. So I don't know what, how much money we're really looking to kind of put there. But knowing that we can at least advise as we're going forward and make this a very fluid process so that those allocations could change as we see the needs change. Because we may come up with something out of the first round of grant proposals that is just the not silver bullet, because there's no such thing as a silver bullet. I mean, even werewolves know that. But something that really does do a lot of what we're aiming for in this first round of grants that we may want to scale up and make a permanent program with some of these funds, because there is no other funding source for it. The other side of that is to make sure that these regi monies are allocated as enhancement monies and not a substitute for what we're already doing. And I think that was a big concern of a lot of people coming into this program or rather into this advisory group, is just making sure that we're not substituting general funds money or DOE money or wherever those funding pots are coming from at this point. And then also not duplicating what's at the housing, in the housing area that is already looking at energy efficiency. I think there's some pieces that I'm just not aware of because housing is not my bailiwick, energy efficiency is. And so I'm not aware of what other innovative grants or programs are out there that are actually looking at that housing side of energy for energy efficiency in terms of the building and all of that. So just making sure that we're not duplicating what we're already doing and not in that we are enhancing and not supplementing. So thank you. Oh, Carrie's back.
I think that those are really, if it's okay, Dan, just real quick, those are really good points, Carmen. And I do want to assure everyone that we also have the goal of it being additive. I think why we see the benefit of having these two first streams is that we're aware of a lot of impediments in housing to link the different streams so that when people are doing the new construction or rehab, that they can then go much above and get that additionality, not to supplement this for what they could have already gotten in another pot and to be focused on construction and rehab for more affordable housing, which is also a big goal. But so definitely, I want to make sure that is a key priority for us as well. We want it to be additive to the goal. And if we could, at some point, let's go to Carrie, but I know that we had several who also brought forward the idea of some percentages with the housing innovation. I think Jonica presented it and Sunshine started it. I would, if we could just have I at least myself want to have a little more clarity on what you were hoping when you said whether that was a support of item 3 being included to start, whether that was a timing request, Sunshine, in terms of having some of that available earlier. Because to Carmen's just point, when we have rolled out new programs, flexibility is really key because we obviously don't want to put a percentage in a bucket that doesn't get fully used. We want to be able to make funding flow to other buckets so that, money doesn't sit anywhere, and that if demand and items, but I think we do have a pretty good sense that there will be a lot of demand in the ASNH and weatherization bucket, but the level of demand, those are all estimates. So Dan, sorry, we'll get to, we can go to Carrie, but I would like to make sure we have a discussion, make sure we understand fully what that Sunshine's request.
Do you want me to respond first? This is Sunshine, or do we want to do Carrie first?
Maybe let's
Sunshine.
Sorry. Go ahead, Carrie.
All right, I'll make this brief. This is a little bit regarding the question around, demand and prioritization, and also going back to Dewan's question around historically economically disadvantaged communities and the definition that was set forth in the 2020 Virginia Clean Economy Act. And just a point of reference for others who may not have followed that piece, that question around how disadvantaged communities can benefit or are potentially impacted negatively through the clean economy transition. That's a piece that DMME will be looking at in partnership with the Council on Environmental Justice and the State Corporation Commission. And we very much, are going to be diving into that topic and working with other agencies such as DHCD on how HEDCs are being looked at. And so I guess my question to this group in this process around prioritization is if there could be some matrix whereby communities that have multiple levels of disadvantages, whether it's, building on low income, to also look at if they're in the coalfield region or if they're a community of color or an indigenous community, if that is kind of seen as an area that could be prioritized if there is a lot of demand across the state for competing funds. So that's a question I think to pose to the group. And then also from an administrative perspective, how do you quantify that? How do you measure that? And then potentially in the future, set up cross-agency reporting opportunities so that DMME and our partners with the SDC and the EJ Council can better understand how those communities are being served through programs like this.
So, Carrie, this is Carmen, and VPLC is involved in the EJ Council. Steve Fishback, our litigation director, is actually a member on that group. We've obviously been involved in the prior advisory council and now with the statutory group. I think this historically disadvantaged community. I think the measurement is based on how it's going to be defined. We had some argument about the current definition in the VCEA, and I threw it to EJ to actually look and define what characteristics really should be like on a checklist of, does this community meet, certain things? Is it in coal, brownfield communities? Is it, is there a certain poverty level that has been sustained over the last decade? Is there an unemployment level that has been sustained through a decade? What are the job opportunities? What are the economic development numbers look like for those communities? And how do you define that community? Is that community a community within a city area? Is that a community that's an entire rural county? And I think that all of that really needs to be looked at through the EJ Council eyes, working with DMME and DHCD, as well as DSS, to really hone in on, what exactly does a historically disadvantaged community in Virginia look like? What are those measurements? And from there, we can start answering those questions. Where is that priority? How do we prioritize those communities amongst each other for programs like this? So I think that's for me, I think that's a broader question that goes outside of this group to really hone in on, how exactly are we as a Commonwealth defining historically disadvantaged communities?
Yep. Very well put, Carmen. And I think to your point and to Carrie's point, much work to be done in that area. And I think certainly I'm sure that Eric supports the fact that DHCD is we're prepared and ready to roll up our sleeves and work with you all on that effort. So I think I'd like to go back to Sunshine to respond to Eric's question on the Innovation Partnership Grant opportunity, and then to Duan.
So I think what I'm going to do is actually take a step backward for a moment and think about just the concept of flexibility and how we are thinking about allocating funds in general. One way to do this, I think we know, and I don't think I'm mischaracterizing this, but somebody jump in if you feel like I am. On the WAP side, we generally know on average how much it costs to serve a home and what these additional funds will unlock and provide. So it's you have a sort of a track record that allows kind of a projection forward about the impact of X number of dollars serving X number of households, on average. On the AS&H side, I actually think that's a much more significant unknown. And I say that because the demand is going to be determined by what we say is the minimum threshold beneath which the additionality component comes into play. So if we say, for example, the threshold for additionality is just meeting code, then the demand is going to be very, very high. If instead we say the threshold for additionality is meeting, Energy Star, then the threshold is going to be different in terms of demand. So to some extent, it's difficult to predict until we hone in on that. It's going to be difficult to predict exactly what the demand is on the AS&H side. So one way to potentially, as we go into that conversation, one way to think about all three of these buckets, and I'm going to come back to the housing innovation here for a second, is that maybe just like ASNH currently has 2 cycles a year in terms of how funds are distributed, maybe there's a preliminary best guess allocation of percentages between these 3 buckets if for cycle 1, recognizing that based on what we see for demand, we may retool for the second round. You know, if WAP funding, WAP demand is through the roof and ASNH is underutilized, then we should be shifting money that direction. Or if it's the other way around, and you know, just to maintain some flexibility. And specifically how that relates to the innovation comment I made earlier, let's say for the moment that we allocate 3% of the money for housing innovation, which is not, I mean, at $50 million, that's still $1.5 million. If you allocate, say, 3% to the innovation grants, whatever they end up being, and then that first cycle, you have a bucket of money sitting there. But if it does, to Eric's point, if it's underutilized, we don't want to have that bucket sitting there unused. In the second cycle, then that can get repurposed and spread into the other buckets as necessary. So that's kind of all I was saying.
That's really helpful. But thank you.
Yeah, agreed with the general flexibility there, and apologies for the whiplash, but I want to go back to Carrie's points and questions. I agree pretty much, Carrie, with everything that you said, and I just wanted to take the time to acknowledge that and emphasize that, and then also add that I do think that this group does have an enormous opportunity to help address and move along some of the benefits to these historically economically disadvantaged communities, and partner with other entities and other areas of government and other groups that are working within this space. That, I mean, there's an opportunity here to really double down on what we are ultimately trying to accomplish here. Yes, the charge of this group is to provide energy efficiency solutions to low-income consumers that will reduce their energy usage and lead to ultimately bill reductions. There's a lot of data collection and follow-up that I think that we can do as well. How many of those residents, as Carrie outlined, are racial minorities? Are we achieving geographic diversity? Are the residents that are being served actually reporting that, yes, we do feel more comfortable because of the indoor living environments? Is there an opportunity to partner with universities or research institutions to really look at positive health outcomes that may come from residents who are living in these buildings that have achieved these energy efficiency services? So there is an opportunity to learn more about the overall benefits that we are providing to people. That I think that, one, that first step of data collection is important, but then two, following up with them in the future for a robust, comprehensive reporting system of how we're actually serving the people that we're trying to serve. So just as quickly, yes, Carrie, I would agree with all the points that you made there generally.
So Dan, this is Chelsea. I had my hand raised as well. I would just say I like everything I agree with everything that Dwan just said, and Carrie, like the idea of a matrix. I think what I'm hearing, or what I'm thinking in my mind, is that really I think DHCD staff needs to go back and develop this Housing Innovation Partnership grant before we can actually decide on allocating money to it. I feel like there needs to actually be something that we can review and look at. And so if it's not ready for prime time this first year, the 2021, which goes through June, then I think I'm leaning towards 0% allocation, because it's not a program that currently exists. I think that DHCD needs to stand the program up. You need to provide us with that timeline. And then once we understand that timeline, then we can allocate funding. But I think that since it does not currently exist, I don't feel comfortable allocating funds to something that does not currently exist or will not exist between now and June. I also agree with Sunshine that I think that the WAP program, that is where we have the most guaranteed energy savings, particularly this first go around. We know the energy savings. We typically know how much it's going to cost. Those are the known quantities, the known factors, and the ASNH is just a little bit more unknown. And so, you know, I would like to see a greater allocation for WAP, particularly this first time around, because it is the biggest known piece at this moment.
This is Jonica. One obstacle I see in WAP is the approval process on multifamily housing. And I think that then ties to the communities you're able to serve. And if there's any way to decouple Department of Energy funding and LIHEAP funding. LIHEAP funding is much more flexible. And is there the possibility of combining LIHEAP funding with this funding to be able to have a little more flexibility? I know that's probably sacrilege, but anyway, you know, that to me would be innovation. The other thing is on bucket 3, the exception to what I just heard for me would be having a study done on what we come up with in buckets 1 and 2 to be able to quantify the savings, et cetera, or the value add that we're bringing. I'm hopeful that on both programs, it's not just solely doing more of what we're already doing, but a deeper dive and more energy efficiency and benefit to our low-income households. So that's the other thing I would add to this.
Yeah, thank you all. Narissa has her hand up.
Yeah, just to kind of add to, I think, both what Chelsea was saying and Janica was saying involving this third category. If we don't want to take the approach that we don't want to allocate anything before June, I at the very least think that there should be maybe a more limited criteria for what we would consider innovations, because I do see some instances where we could potentially start some quote unquote innovative things relatively quickly, and we don't want to necessarily, like to Jennifer's point, keep doing a whole bunch more of this. I mean, we know these things work, but if there's some opportunity early on to start with some of these smaller things, as long as there's like a well-defined criteria for that, I think it's something we should consider.
Yeah. Thank you all. This is, I think I think the juices are flowing now, and I think folks are really, you're really engaging with us, and I think providing some very helpful feedback. And, you know, we'll have to, as Eric said, you know, we're going to have to sort of sort through this. We don't think that, at least what I'm hearing, is not any sort of major conflicts or sort of hesitations here, but really some very thoughtful comments about how we sort of best allocate these resources across a portfolio of investments. And I think that, you know, this is exactly what we need. Just a quick time check. We're coming up on noon, which is the time, and we've kind of become untethered from the agenda, but I think it's fine. And coming up on noon, we were going to offer the opportunity for public comments. So what I would suggest is, and I think we had intended to, after the public comment period, to sort of have Willie give a little bit of an overview. And I think this is a nice segue from the question that Jonica asked with regard to flexibility with other funding sources for the WAP program. So what I would suggest is, if we could let Chase offer his comments, because I do suspect they may have something to do with the WAP program, then I would suggest that we could sort of turn the floor over to Willie and have a deeper dive discussion on some of those logistical issues with WAP and the funding stream. Does that sound reasonable? I see a few heads nodding, a couple thumbs up. All right, all right, all right. Mr. Counts, thank you for being our intrepid public commenter today.
Thank you for having me. Chase Counts with Community Housing Partners, or in this case, CHP Energy Solutions. Full disclosure, I'll keep my comments very brief, but full disclosure, Jonica Casper is my CEO for reference. I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge and show my appreciation to the advisory committee for considering the proposal to utilize some of the revenues towards addressing deferral issues that we come across with the weatherization assistance program. Just for perspective, just since the last HIEE stakeholder meeting less than a month ago, based on historical records or historical trends, the weatherization assistance program has generated an additional 41 deferrals, and we'll likely have another 100 deferrals by the end of this first quarter. So I just wanted to reiterate that these funds are would be applied towards essentially a shovel-ready program, and just wanted to appreciate again demonstrate my appreciation for the advisory committee's response to the comments made prior. And that's all.
Thank you, Chase. We appreciate it. Chris Meyer with LEAP. Chris, if you're on the line.
Yes, thank you, Dan, and thank you for all the stakeholders of the advisory group that are participating today. Appreciate you guys just putting your time into this. Chris Meyer, Executive Director of the Local Energy Alliance Program, based in Charlottesville, Virginia. I just wanted to make some observations on the conversation around the allocations. I do agree with Sunshine and Chelsea's kind of observations on reducing the amount for the housing innovation grant side of things, just because at the moment, again, it still seems it needs to be drawn out. And I would like to see that opportunity in the future to have a grant program like that. But at the moment, again, because of the immediate needs, I think that are out there and the time that would take to stand up such a program. I mean, I think you're talking about processes for reviewing and criteria for making decisions about, how much to grant and to whom. You have to open up a contest, and I assume have a couple months or at least weeks available for people to submit grant applications, and then judge those grant applications, etc. All that, my assumption is will take 6 to 8 months, and again, we're looking to try to make an impact as much as possible now. So at least from LEAP's perspective, I would hope that the majority of the funds are, at least in this first portion, allocated to the existing programs that DHCD runs at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I think I saw Narissa and Dewan with hands up, so we can go in that order if you'd like. Narissa, you're on mute.
No, I'm sorry. That was an accident. I didn't have anything to add.
Okay. Dewan, you're on mute.
I lowered my hand instead of taking myself off mute. No, this was a quick comment I wanted to make before the public comment, just very, very quickly on the allocations, and how much and when and existing versus new. I don't have a firm opinion yet, and so I just caveating, but I just wanted to just flag a bit of caution that too often I think that we rush in many instances like this to tackle the lowest hanging fruit first because there is need and it is the easiest. Well, that's not necessarily the best option. So I just wanted to just a word of caution here to let's take some time to think about what are the true goals that we want to accomplish, and let's not because if we don't, then often it keeps getting on the back burner further and further and further down the road because we keep chasing the lowest hanging fruit. So that's the only comment I want to make.
And I would just second Juwan's comment. I think that's what I was trying to get at. I did not say it nearly as eloquently, but yes, I agree. I concur.
Dan?
Yes, Eric.
I do think we should just make sure we ask if there's any other additional public commenters. I don't think we had anyone else signed up, but just in case there was anyone else in the public knows that this is you are available to have any additional public comment before we close that.
Yes, Eric, you beat me to it. And Chris and Chase, thank you very much for your brevity. And so, but I think well said in terms of and message delivered and heard in terms of what you said. So any other, okay, we've got Carrie and Carrie. We have Carrie Walker, and then we've got Carrie Hearn with DMME.
This is Carrie Walker with Project Homes, and I do want to reinforce what Jonica had to say regarding the multifamily. It's one of the underserved areas in the WAP program, and if we can come up with a way to uncouple and move that forward, we will be able to serve hundreds more people. Thank you, and thank you all for your work.
Thank you, Carrie. Carrie Hearn.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, just a quick comment to, and I know, Dan, you're quite familiar with the U.S. Department of Energy's LEAD tool around energy burden, but I wanted to reinforce that tool as something that DMME and the Clean Energy Advisory Board has also looked at around energy burdens across the state and looking at, that by census tract in terms of the gravity of the percentage of an individual household's energy use compared to their overall, monthly income. And that is yet another piece that you all can consider. I'm happy to speak with anyone individually one-on-one to go over our analysis. That analysis is also available on DMME's website under the Clean Energy Advisory Board resources. And, I think it's just a really robust tool. There are other tools that we have at our disposal, and we're happy to support the process and analysis in any way that we can. So thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. And I think we could envision, downloading. I will download the analysis that you did, and maybe we can share that with the advisory group for perspective. And then Pam Kessner has said there may be some folks on the phone who want to make public comment, but haven't found the raise hand button. So if there is anyone on the line who would like to offer some comments, please feel free to jump on the line. And so hearing none, well, I see, let's see, I see Narissa's hand up and I see Chris's hand up. So Chris, why don't we, if you could jump back on and then we'll go to Narissa. Oh, okay. He was too quick on the hand up button. Narissa, did you have a comment?
No, I just keep forgetting to lower my hand. I'm sorry.
Okay, all right. Fair enough. So let's see. I think at this point, as I mentioned before, we're seeing a lot of,
Dan, I'm sorry. There's a Carrie somebody who's got her hand up. W-A.
That may be Carrie Walker. I think we just heard from her.
Oh, okay, great. Sorry.
So let's see. Willie, if you're comfortable, would you mind
sure
picking up discussion from here and kind of leading the discussion on WAP?
Sure. So what I wanted to do was kind of a couple of things. One, I've received a few inquiries from folks who wanted to know a little bit more about, weatherization and kind of what that looks like, and then talk specifically about our program here in Virginia, our delivery system, And then really towards the end, just kind of touch on, because there have been a lot of developments in weatherization in the last 2 weeks related to the federal appropriations bill that was passed, which will play into you know, kind of the rollout of this and how it would be integrated. So just kind of real quick, so I've had a couple of folks call me and say, you know, I know there's a number of weatherization programs out there, and so what's different about DHCD's program versus some other program and utility programs, et cetera. So I always like to tell people that, you know, the weatherization, the word weatherization is not a copyrighted term. So there are a lot of things that are referred to as weatherization that if you talk to someone in the weatherization assistance program, they'll say, well, that's, you know, those are energy measures, but that's not really weatherization. So the weatherization assistance program for low-income families is a federally codified program administered through the U.S. Department of Energy. The other key piece of that is that within the Department of Energy, there are only about 3 actual deployment programs in the Office of Weatherization and Intergovernmental Affairs. For those of you familiar with the federal structure, DOE is primarily an R&D function of the federal government. And so with these small deployment programs, they have, and this program has been around since 1976, they're very tightly written, for lack of a better term, almost as a protection measure to ensure that continued deployment function within the Department of Energy, because there have been a lot of discussions over the years about how come, you know, weatherization program isn't over at HUD, and how come they're not combined with other rehab programs and those types of things. And so I wanted to make sure that folks understand that when you hear the term weatherization from DHCD's lens, it is structured by the Weatherization Assistance Program for low-income families. And so the other irony of this program is that is the codified federal program, and the Department of Energy's budget funds about 1/3 of the program. And so over the years, as the program grew and the need grew, the federal appropriators basically said, instead of appropriating more money to this R&D agency for this small deployment program, we'll figure out other ways to fund it, the delivery of the program. So that's where somewhere in the late, I guess, 80s, early 90s, they came up with the idea of splitting off a portion of the LIHEAP funding and allowing states to use that to supplement the Weatherization Assistance Program. Just so you know, universally across the state, across the country, there's probably only about 30 to 35 states that actually supplement their Weatherization Assistance Program with LIHEAP funds. That number used to be higher. And then when we went into in whenever that was, 2008, 2009, and Congress appropriated, you know, $5 billion to the program, a number of states chose to cut back or remove completely their pass-through of LIHEAP funds to support weatherization. So when you go to states and you talk to them about their programs are funded differently. We've been very fortunate in Virginia because not only does our LIHEAP program supplement our program, but somewhere around 99, 2000, the advocates in the state decided to go to the General Assembly and codify that mandatory pass-through. So we're fortunate. So when you hear us talk about the Weatherization Assistance Program, it's a program that's funded by 1/3 DOE funding, 2/3 LIHEAP funding, but all the program structure is set by the Department of Energy's rules and regulations. So with that said, DOE has firmly held that this is an energy efficiency program and not a rehab program. So our network's ability to address housing stock that has become deteriorated over time has been tremendously impacted by that strong federal restriction against using any LIHEAP or any weatherization funds for any sort of rehab impact or activity on the low-income housing. So that's one of the, and I wanted to give a little sense and context to when you hear us talk about deferrals, and for those of you who aren't familiar with the program, a good reason for those deferrals are that we have limited ability to address structural, some health and safety issues, not all, but certainly any housing stability issues with weatherization funds because of that federal restriction on how the DOE program is structured. Now, one of the things you heard today, Jonica mentioned about the fact that there's some additional flexibility with LIHEAP funds. that's because the way the program was structured, LIHEAP made that pass-through allowable, but they allowed states to kind of structure how they use the funds. And so I guess to Daywan's point about sometimes you go after the path of least resistance, the easiest thing to do initially was to braid those funds all under all of the existing rules. And that way we could roll them out, keep them moving. Now, what's happened since then is there's been a push for greater flexibility, and in some situations trying to decouple those funds. The issue ends up being that the basic program structure has always still been dictated by those DOE rules. And so I think with perhaps this additional funding being included in that, there could be the potential that we could strengthen our position, or at least have broadened the discussion about that possibility of, because if at some point this becomes a major source of funding for that activity, certainly I think that would lend itself to the possibility of a broader vision of how we deliver a weatherization program, but use an outside funding source. So I just kind of wanted to make you all aware of that, give you that little bit of background. As you saw from the slide presentation, the weatherization assistance program currently impacts anywhere from about 2,200 at its current funding level, about 2,200 to 2,500 homes a year in the state. The challenges that we've always had with a lot of the federal funding programs, they're an annual appropriation. Actually, it's been funny because life for the program has been fairly good for the last 3 years, outside of COVID impact, of course, and primarily because the annual appropriations have been consistent for the last 3 years. For those of you who know, if you look over the last 10-year window, there's been a series of continual resolutions. So, we never knew when the money was coming or how much it was coming, and it was kind of doled out in thirds or quarters or something like that. So we've seen a lot more stability in the delivery of the program over the most recent 2 to 3 years. The other thing that I wanted to make sure that folks understood is right now the program is delivered through a network of locally based, professionally trained weatherization agencies. And those agencies deliver their programs through one of two ways, either solely through subcontract, or I should say 3 ways, solely through subcontracting out the weatherization work, solely through crews who are employees of the organization, and some of our agencies do it through a hybrid of, they have some crew-based delivery and they also subcontract out. And so one of the things that we've talked about this potential deployment is, that we know that we would have to kind of look across our network, look at those agencies, for example, that solely work with crews, and work with them and talk to them about how do they expand their delivery network through the subcontracting component, for those other agencies that are already subcontracting, trying to figure out and ensure that we can outline ways that they can expand that subcontracting delivery network. And you heard some of those comments, I think, at our previous stakeholder input group, where folks basically said if there's an ability to ensure some level of funding over an extended period of time, or 2 or 3 or 4 years, then certainly that would allow them to attract and retain that expanded contracted base. And so these are all kind of things that we're have been discussing with the network. And if the stakeholder group recommended specific allocation to them, how quickly could they scale up and then start delivery of the program. So just for a number of purposes, we currently have an existing provider network of 17 weatherization agencies that serve statewide. And again, that's been structured primarily through the DOE requirements. And so certainly we know that, we've had some discussions with the organizations about if our ability to impact the low-income households that we would be able to serve with this program, then we'd have to obviously examine that current structure and make some determinations on our ability or whether it would be necessary to kind of expand that delivery network. Just the other quick things, because I don't want to take up too much time, but in terms of the weatherization delivery program, I mentioned their trained crews. They use all of these services delivered through by using the computerized energy assessment and advanced diagnostic equipment, such as blower doors, manometers, infrared cameras. And so it's a fairly thorough delivery network and a trained network. In terms of general numbers, we know, and these are through national studies, and I like the idea somebody mentioned about the possibility of partnering with Virginia Tech or some other state-based organization. We don't have at this point a state audit or evaluation of the program, and so a lot of it's been driven by national evaluations, and this may be an opportunity as we talk about how do we measure some of those cost savings, not only to the customers but to the ratepayers in terms of utility programs, et cetera, that's something I would really like us to figure out how we, as an input group, how do we do that? What that should look like. But we have some national numbers that tell us that annual cost savings per household range or average about $283 to $285 a year. There's an 18% annual heating consumption saving, 7% annual electric consumption savings. We know through the national study for every dollar invested through the Weatherization Assistance Program that there's a return of energy benefit to roughly about $1.80 to almost $2 for every dollar investment. And for non-energy benefits, and I did mention, go into detail at least, the weatherization also addresses health and safety issues. But the non-energy benefits have been measured out at about $2.78 for every dollar invested through the existing program. And I think that what other things I want to make sure I touch on? Oh, so I'll talk just real quickly about, I mentioned some recent activity that's happened at the federal level that we think is going to have a tremendous impact on the program. First, there was, as part of the WAP reauthorization in 2021 federal appropriations bill, the weatherization program, the DOE portion of the budget was increased by $25 million, and that was nationwide. So, and it's awarded on the formula. So Virginia's allocation will increase by a small amount. The grantee, the ability for states to pass along administrative costs or to cover administrative costs for the agencies was increased. Currently, the DOE program, like most federal programs, has a 10% cap on whatever comes in that can be used for administration of the program, and DHCD currently splits that 10% with the Weatherization Network, and so that number was increased from 10 to 15%. So those are things that we can kind of roll into and consider. The definition of weatherization materials now includes renewable energy technologies, and so that's providing some flexibility to include cost-effective renewable measures and other emergency technologies as program measures within the Weatherization Assistance Program. The cost benefit now allows states to review health and safety and other energy benefits can be included into that calculation of cost savings and our ability to impact. One of the things, the next thing that's been rolled out was the new legislation included it gave states some flexibility to include cost-effective renewable energy measures and other emerging technology programs as part of potential funding under this program, which was previously a restriction. And then the last thing, which I think is probably most impactful, is that for those of you not familiar with the program, DOE had a hard date in the statute. It says, I think it was September 1994, that said that if the house was weatherized prior to or after September 1994, that house was no longer eligible for weatherization services. They have changed that in the new legislation to a 15-year rolling date. So if your house was weatherized, or if that property or that unit was weatherized more than 15 years ago, it is now eligible for re-weatherization. That's a huge change in the federal legislation. And it's one of those ones that you look at and say it's well past time, because when you look at a lot of the technology, that kind of goes in line with the lifespan of a lot of the technological advances that have been identified through the program. And so the reason why I think that's critical is that that's going to bring back online a number of housing units that had been previously weatherized that were not able to be counted in any potential housing stock. So now we're talking about the deferral rates for units that either had structural issues, roofing issues, and those types of things, where the families and the households were income qualified, but they couldn't be addressed under the DOE program, this would be an opportunity to serve those homes, as well as those homes that were weatherized and may not be in a deteriorated state, but if they were weatherized, 15 or 16 or 17 years ago, they're now eligible to come back into the program. And so I think those are the key things I just wanted to touch on, give you a little bit of history and background on, and certainly answer any questions you might have. And I tried to do that in 20 minutes, Dan.
Well, the other thing we didn't tell them, Willie, is there was going to be a quiz, and they can't get off the call until they pass the quiz. Right? Any thoughts? Anyone want to jump in with a question or comment regarding weatherization program?
This is Carmen. I would be really interested in knowing, I know Chase, your organization, Jenica, your organization has done a study looking at the deferrals and like what are the reasons for the deferral. And so it'd be interesting to know how many of those deferrals now are eligible for weatherization again with the new rule on that rolling date. Because, 1994 was 26 years ago. And that's, I mean, my weather stripping doesn't last 26 years. So it'd be interesting to know how many of those deferrals could come back on now, just through that small but very significant change in the weatherization program.
Yeah, we'll be able to change out the plastic we put on the windows.
All right, folks, I'm going to take a stab at wrapping up here, and I out of respect for your time, and we really do appreciate all the comments. This has been a great meeting and a great conversation. And I do want to just sort of see if I can summarize what we DHCD need to take away from the guidance that you gave us. So I think we heard really loud and clear strong support for the WAP program, and I think first and foremost that was across the board. And so the idea of flexibility of these regi funds giving us some flexibility to serve additional households, to address some structural issues that were causing these homes to be deferred. I'm hearing very strong support for that. I'm hearing strong support, but somewhat less strong support for affordables and special needs housing. And I think the key question there is regarding the additionality component that Sunshine brought up, which is to say, what is the additional energy efficiency and health and safety requirement per that program to access these funds. And we did hear interest, but overall some hesitation with regard to, and I think Chelsea summarized this very well, the Housing Innovation Grant Program or Housing Innovation Partnership Program, that the advisory group would like to see a more fleshed out proposal on that before making a decision to allocate funding for that program. So that's, so, and inviting.
Dan, it's Michelle. Can I add another comment on that specifically?
Yes, ma'am. Yep.
So one of the things that sort of struck me in the innovation grant program, I like that program a lot, and so would like to continue to talk about that. I think it might be useful to think about two buckets of things. One is new construction and then renovation separately. Because I think the issues that you deal with in those two buckets are different, right? So with new construction, often it's constructability issues. And certainly there can be great efficiency improvements above the baseline code there. But then on the renovation side, it's always harder because each project seems to be sort of a one-off. So I like the idea of more looking at those kind of deep retrofits. Can there be some kind of studies that maybe can be used to create a program that more broadly can be used across a number of different types of developments, but there you tend to get really big efficiency improvements, right? Because those projects are so much older. So anyway, just two kind of thoughts as you think going forward with that program and on the innovation grants.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Michelle. And I will mention that we had a conversation with Virginia Housing about their Reach Innovation Grant Program yesterday, actually Monday, I'm sorry. And the projects that they've awarded to date are new construction. So one of the things that we talked about is the need for innovation on the renovation and rehab side. And so that was, that was one way that we talked about, that there's a need and there's a larger market out there potentially for, for innovation on the retrofit side. So I think that's a
Fabulous. Thanks.
Yeah.
I would just, this is Jenica again. I don't mean to beat this to death, but innovation has been a core value for us for a long time, but I've been doing this for 45 years. And to be honest, I think the term is overplayed. There isn't that much innovation, modular and container. And, we've been talking about that for 25 years. And while I think the process for manufactured and modular housing has improved and you can get to those efficiencies, I think the key is around studying that and determining the impact of the cost versus the value you get out of that. And currently on the LIHTC program, where you get points for doing energy conservation stuff, there is an offset around cost. And a lot of people try to say that there isn't a cost to those higher tech systems, but there is. And and that additional cost hits you on your scoring side, for instance, on the LIHTC program. So somebody studying those technologies and seeing the return on investment, I think would be critical to moving the people that are setting the criteria for the competition on LIHTC. I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but for every innovation and system that you put in, there's an offset, because if it costs more than traditional, you get some points and you lose some points in that competition, if that makes sense.
Yes.
This is Sunshine. I had my hand raised, but I'll just jump in here too, because this gets at Jonica's point a little bit too. I do want to point out that I think the reason that we didn't necessarily see as much robust discussion around the AS&H is because there are still a significant number of questions about how it might be structured. And it's hard to evaluate as kind of the point I was making before. One suggestion might be that there is a short-term subgroup focused specifically on that to help flesh out what the opportunities might look like, and one way of characterizing that. And it probably needs to include some Virginia housing staff on the tax credit side to think that through a bit, to come back and address the question of additionality and at least make an initial starting proposal for them to flesh out and compare to WAP and see where the dividing line needs to be.
Yeah, to add on, this is Carmen, to add on to what Sunshine just said, I mean, one of the things that I've been thinking as we've been going through this meeting is like just getting a matrix of what those needs are under these different buckets. I mean, I think, Dan, you also pointed out in the very beginning in terms of the Innovation Grants Program, the one group that's not represented here very well, other than poor Karen, on our advisory group, is the local government, right? Like, what are their thoughts and what are their needs at this point in terms of their public housing structures and what they want to do at the local level, because there is no funding for them as it relates to energy efficiency to serve their low income communities, right? Unless they come up with it themselves. So I really would like to get a broader picture and understanding of, under these three different types of buckets, what exactly is the need out there? don't need very specifics, but at least a better fleshing out so I have a better idea of what it is that we're looking at and how we're balancing this.
All right, Sunshine, did you have your hand up, or was that from previous comment that you provided?
That was my previous comment. Sorry, I'll take it down.
All right. So I would like to make a motion that we try to wrap this up and adjourn out of respect for everyone's time. What I will offer is that I will listen to the recording and see if I can get some notes together from this discussion so that everybody has that for reference. And then I think we've heard loud and clear that we need to internally, DHCD needs to do some additional work to flesh out both the additionality component of the ASNH piece and the Housing Innovation Partnership grant potential. So that's what if anyone would like to volunteer to be on that subgroup that Sunshine mentioned, please also let me know, and I'm happy to make some time to convene some folks who could take some time to dive into that with us a little bit more. So I know our team has some folks that need to peel off for another meeting. So I do want to thank everybody again tremendously for this time today. We really appreciate it. It's been an excellent conversation. I think that everyone pitched in and we got some great suggestions. I think we've got some good direction going forward, and I think that's super helpful to us. So can't thank you enough. But with that, would like to adjourn the meeting. So if I can get a motion, we'll move ahead and close up the discussion for today.
This is Chelsea. I motion we adjourn.
Second.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Please stay safe, and we will be in touch with you very, very soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.